I woke up to the sound of diesel and metal, the kind of racket that tells you something expensive is happening without your permission. It was 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. I stumbled out in yesterday's clothes and found 3 men in safety vests cutting through my chain-link fence with bolt cutters like it was gift wrap. Sparks showered onto crushed tomato vines. An excavator idled nearby, its teeth already in the soil I'd built for 3 years. And right in the middle of it all stood Delilah Thornfield, our homeowners association president, grinning at a clipboard and waving paperwork like a magic wand. She announced, with a tone that said she'd practiced this in the mirror, Community Water Project. Your property was in the way. Then I saw the pipe. 8 inches in diameter, laid like a scar across my vegetable beds, the beds my daughter and I had planned and planted every summer since she was 8. The pipe cut clean through $15,000 of landscaping, drip irrigation lines, and heirloom tomatoes that were weeks away from harvest. Here's what Delilah didn't know. I'm a retired Army Corps of Engineers water specialist. I've spent 23 years designing and protecting water systems in places where a bad decision floods a valley and ruins federal careers. I grew up in Colorado, and I came home to retire on 2.3 acres my grandfather left me. Land with agricultural tax status, written water rights, and a deed that specifically prohibits utility easements without written permission. My grandfather drafted that document in 1987 because he understood one thing better than anyone else I've known. You protect what matters by anticipating the people who'll try to take it. My name is Marcus Blackwood. I'm 52. I own a property in Pine Ridge Estates outside Denver. My daughter, Elena, 16, spends summers here. She cares about soil the way some girls care about prom dresses. Every season, she arrives with notebooks full of plans, crop rotation charts, drip zones, companion planting notes that would make a landscape architect wipe their eyes. The garden wasn't just vegetables. It was time we built together after my divorce. Conversations between rows, the sound of water on leaves at dusk, the smell of basil cut fresh for dinner. When the excavator's bucket chewed into our beds and sent black soil flying, it was ripping more than roots. It was ripping history. Pine Ridge Estates is exactly what it sounds like on a brochure. Suburban, upper-middle class, HOA fees that creep upward like ivy. Most of the folks here are good neighbors. They mow, they wave, they keep Christmas lights up just long enough. Then there's Delilah. Imagine every HOA horror story you've heard. Then give it a pearl necklace, a white BMW X5, a city planning commissioner for a husband, and a habit of calling things community improvements when she means whatever makes my cul-de-sac look more expensive. She's run the homeowners association for 8 years like a personal brand. Delilah's problem with me started long before a trench cut my garden in half. It started with a view from her kitchen window, the view of a working homestead on land she thinks should be a lawn. From that distance, the righteousness looks tidy and the weeds look unruly. She sent a formal notice 3 weeks before the fence cutting. My gardens violated community aesthetic standards, and I should convert them to approved residential landscaping. I explained, politely, that my property holds an agricultural classification with a perpetual water rights clause, and that my grandfather's deed prohibits utility easements without owner consent. She shot back that grandfathered rights don't override modern community standards, and that my farm lowered property values in the premium section. That phrase told me everything. This wasn't about taste. It was about eliminating my agricultural status, raising HOA revenue, and strengthening her grip on Pine Ridge. The morning the machines arrived, I asked to see the permits. Delilah waved papers that looked official and smelled like toner. A city inspector from her husband's department came by the next day, glanced at the ruin, and declared the work properly permitted. When I showed him the deed language, no utility easements without written owner consent, he shrugged. Then came the $2,500 citation for interfering with municipal utility projects, which in Pine Ridge apparently means asking people not to destroy your property. By Friday, I had a restraining order claiming I'd threatened the crew with physical violence. Court in 3 weeks. Legal bills piling up before the hearing. That's when I hired Janet Rodriguez. If you've ever fought an HOA board, you want a lawyer who knows property rights, easement law, and how fast a board president can turn guidelines into punishment. Janet specializes in homeowners association overreach and land use manipulation. She has a reputation for making suburban tyrants uncomfortable. Janet's first discovery was clean and beautiful. The HOA permit application listed my parcel as vacant municipal land. Not a clerical error. Fraud. Then she found the clause I'd grown up hearing my grandfather quote, but never fully appreciated. Any unauthorized utility work on our property would void the city's access to our historical water rights. Those water rights included access to Clearwater Springs, the same springs that supply 73% of Pine Ridge's water, secured by my grandfather in 1987, 15 years before Pine Ridge was built. We filed an emergency injunction. The judge granted it within 48 hours. Delilah made her first catastrophic mistake that same week. At 11:47 p.m. on Tuesday, my security cameras caught HOA crews back on my land, burying additional pipe sections 200 feet beyond the areas described in their permits. The footage showed Delilah in her BMW parked in the shadows, directing the work by walkie-talkie. They were violating a court injunction on camera. They weren't just trespassing, they were expanding their infrastructure footprint. Land theft, dressed like improvements. Elena had filmed everything she could on her phone. She posted clips to TikTok, cautiously, with dates and times, and watched 15,000 views become 50,000 in a day. People who'd suffered HOA abuse chimed in with their own stories. By the end of the week, Pine Ridge trended locally with words you don't put on postcards. Our neighbors began to knock on my door. Florence Hartwell arrived with warm cookies and a banker's box that smelled like a library. 73 years old, eyes sharp as August, she said, "I've been keeping records for 15 years. She spread hand-drawn maps on my workbench showing unauthorized survey markers on 23 properties. The HOA had been measuring land behind pools and sheds and garden beds without permission. The Patels had caught men taking soil samples in their backyard at dawn. The Kowalskis found stakes behind their fence. This wasn't an emergency project. It was a plan. Delilah's next move, declaring my property blighted, came with exactly 48 hours' notice for a city council hearing. Barely legal under state law. Rick Thornfield recused himself, but his deputy chaired the meeting. You can guess the rest. Delilah presented aerial photos taken in winter dormancy and called them evidence of neglect. Cropped tight, shot low, fertile soil became lunar wasteland. When it was my turn, I handed the council my grandfather's deed and showed Elena's slideshow, lush, green, structured rows, drip lines sparkling at dawn. Then Janet took the floor. She presented payment records showing Rick Thornfield's construction company had received more than 78% of municipal contracts funded by HOA assessments, without competitive bidding. Over $200,000 paid to his firm in 3 years. She explained, calmly, that condemnation requires a legitimate public purpose and cannot serve private financial interests. Elena live-streamed the hearing. 45,000 people watched a small-town power structure start to crack. The vote was supposed to be a rubber stamp. Instead, the motion failed. Delilah cornered me in the parking lot afterward, standing between two trucks with her engine idling in the dark. "You have no idea what you're messing with," she hissed, clutching her bag like it was the Constitution. "This community has ways of dealing with troublemakers. Accidents happen." The man in her passenger seat wore a low baseball cap and used a professional camera to photograph my license plate. Elena recorded the exchange, every word, every threat, every click. I stopped sleeping. Not from fear, although I checked my mirrors more often, but because I started reading. I spent nights in the county courthouse basement with property books that smell like time. That's where I found the page I needed. My grandfather's water rights weren't casual. They were prior appropriation rights, first in time, first in right, secured before the homeowners association existed, before Pine Ridge existed, before Delilah had the idea to turn water into a weapon. Those rights included direct access to Clearwater Springs, 2.3 miles upstream, which delivered most of Pine Ridge's water. The springs weren't owned by the city. They belonged to Bill Morrison, a 78-year-old rancher tired of battles with a homeowners association he didn't vote for and a board president who sent insulting offers through intermediaries. He'd been trying to sell for over a year. Asking price, $127,000. Janet nearly spit her coffee when I showed her the deed language. "Marcus," she said, papers whispering under her hands, "your grandfather's water rights predate every municipal agreement in this valley. If you purchase Clearwater Springs, you don't just have leverage. You control the source." While Delilah tried to strangle my water pressure, I made an offer on the Springs through a separate agent. Morrison accepted. He'd had enough of lowball tactics and wanted his family's land in honest hands. We set closing for 30 days. Meanwhile, Delilah throttled my service to 12 psi through a flow management system she installed under cover of dawn. I couldn't run a washing machine. Elena couldn't shower before school. My tomatoes wilted by noon. A notice arrived, $8,500, to restore normal service. Extortion, printed on letterhead. Then something shifted in the neighborhood. People across Pine Ridge experienced their own pressure drops. Florence's morning shower became a shrug. The Kowalski's sprinkler died during a heat wave. 2 elderly neighbors ended up at the ER for dehydration because their home pressure couldn't run the medical equipment they use daily. Delilah passed an emergency assessment of $31 a month to cover urgent infrastructure improvements. She blamed my illegal agricultural usage for the problems her system created. My property wasn't the only one under attack anymore. The whole community was paying for the privilege of being manipulated. And then came the financial records. After 3 weeks of discovery fights, Janet pried the HOA's books loose. The numbers read like a textbook for municipal corruption. The HOA was bleeding $97,000 annually, hidden with creative accounting. Emergency assessments funded a slush account controlled by Delilah's faction. The water project that destroyed my garden was budgeted for $45,000 and somehow cost $130,000, awarded to Rick's construction company without competitive bidding. Invoices showed markups that violated state procurement laws. There were emails about eliminating agricultural exemptions through infrastructure necessity. There were handwritten notes in Delilah's neat hand: force agricultural conversion via water control. Increase luxury tax base. Fund premium amenities for Section A. Section A is where Delilah lives. It wasn't mismanagement. It was a plan, documented, deliberate, predatory. They had manufactured scarcity, reduced water pressure to create crisis, increased fees to solve the crisis, and targeted properties like mine that didn't fit their tax strategy. This is the kind of thing I had investigated overseas in places with fewer checks and balances. The outrageous thing is that it was happening here, funded by people writing $340 checks to their HOA every month. I built a war room in my garage. Maps, deeds, invoices. Florence brought meeting minutes. Dave Kowalski, the plumber who's upgraded more of Pine Ridge's pipes than anyone, showed me technical spec sheets proving Delilah had installed pressure regulators that saved HOA money while starving homes of water. Elena turned into a journalist in front of my eyes, coordinating with housing advocates and earning calls from Colorado Public Radio and the Denver Post. Dr. Sarah Henry from the University of Colorado's Law School confirmed timelines for environmental assessments and water rights transfers. We wrote a plan in phases. Phase 1, buy Clearwater Springs through an agricultural LLC. Phase 2, finish due diligence and file federal civil rights complaints for harassment and discrimination, based on threats against a veteran and an attempt to weaponize child services. Phase 3, offer a settlement at the annual HOA meeting, board resignations, restitution, a fair water contract. Phase 4, if refused, terminate Pine Ridge's access under the expired contract and restructure governance with community oversight. Delilah escalated, as bullies do when someone takes away their stick. Glossy flyers appeared at 3 a.m., showing my army photo under headlines calling me dangerous veteran. They said I'd been dishonorably discharged, lie, that I threatened women, lie, that I used PTSD as an excuse, insulting, and also a lie. Elena filmed herself tearing down a flyer, pulled up my public service records, and debunked every claim live. 89,000 people watched my 16-year-old calmly dismantle a smear campaign. Anonymous posts spread in neighborhood groups. A black SUV with tinted windows sat outside our house for 47 minutes, photographing everything we owned. The license plate traced to a private investigation firm in Denver, the kind wealthy clients use when they want reputation management without leaving fingerprints. We placed a recorder at the community center. It captured Delilah telling her closest ally exactly what we needed a jury to hear. This is about neutralizing the Marcus problem before he ruins everything. He's too smart and too stubborn. We need him discredited, isolated, or gone before the annual meeting. Whatever it takes. Federal civil rights complaints went out the next morning. The FBI's white-collar crime unit opened a preliminary case based on the financials. Delilah requested a reasonable adult conversation at a Starbucks. Janet coached me to record it. I bought a latte and sat across from a woman who looked like she practiced empathy in a mirror. She slid a manila envelope across the table, $75,000 cash for voluntary cooperation. When I declined, she said something that will stick with me for the rest of my life. Veterans with PTSD often lose custody battles. Child Services takes anonymous reports seriously. Then, honorable discharges sometimes hide disciplinary issues. It would be unfortunate if local contractors started hearing rumors about your reliability. She threatened to use my military record as a cudgel and Child Services as a weapon. Every word was recorded. Every word is now part of a federal file. I closed on Clearwater Springs at 2:47 p.m. on September 12th. The Colorado State Water Board approved the rights transfer. Environmental assessments were clean. I controlled the source that supplies 78% of Pine Ridge's water under prior appropriation doctrine that predates any contract Delilah ever dreamt up. September 18th, annual HOA meeting day, wasn't a meeting. It was a reckoning. The community center usually draws 25 people. 412 showed up. News cameras were there. A Colorado Attorney General investigator sat in the back with a legal pad. Delilah came in like a CEO. She had a 52-minute PowerPoint about modernization and growth and community standards. She bragged about resolving our water rights dispute through voluntary cooperation. Florence stood up and asked why her water bill went up $43 while her pressure dropped by half. Dave presented system diagrams proving deliberate throttling. The Hendersons, the Patels, and the Kowalskis stood and told stories that matched mine: retroactive violations, discriminatory enforcement, illegal assessments. Elena live-streamed to 93,000, and the comments filled with people recognizing their own HOAs in our stories. Delilah announced that the board had secured funding to purchase Clearwater Springs, and that usage fees would reflect true infrastructure costs. The room went silent. I stood, walked to the podium, opened a folder, and held up a deed. As of September 12th, I own Clearwater Springs and all associated water rights that supply most of Pine Ridge, I said. Your community water contract expired 11 months ago. This is your 30-day notice, effective immediately, unless there is a significant change in community governance. Delilah screamed that I couldn't hold families hostage. The irony didn't need pointing out. Janet explained Colorado water law in clear English and detailed how prior appropriation works. The vote to remove the entire board passed 403-9. Subpoenas were served. Agents from the FBI's white-collar division slipped through the back doors with silence like gravity. Elena's stream hit 127,000 viewers. You could feel the air change. It felt like a community standing up. The next 14 days moved like a time-lapse of a meadow in spring. Pine Ridge elected a new board. Florence agreed to serve as interim president. Emergency audits revealed the full scope of financial abuse. HOA fees dropped from $340 to $195 with quarterly transparency that would satisfy a government auditor. Delilah pleaded guilty to embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. She got 3 years in federal prison and $427,000 in restitution. Rick resigned from the Planning Commission. His firm lost municipal contracts and sold their house. I signed a 15-year water contract at fair market rates for the community with clauses preventing any future manipulation, public oversight, conservation protections, emergency access terms written in real legal English. We converted 1.2 acres into an educational garden with raised beds for families, kids learning drip emitters and companion planting where an excavator once chewed bedlines. The Clearwater Springs Conservation Initiative partnered with Colorado State University's Extension Program to teach sustainable water management. Our annual water rights workshop draws 400 homeowners who want to understand their property rights and how to protect them from HOA overreach and municipal manipulation. Elena's documentary, Suburban Water Wars, won the Colorado Student Film Competition and sold to a streaming platform for $89,000, which turned out to be the exact number we needed to refill her college fund. She received scholarship offers from journalism programs because she'd done the thing good journalists do: tell the truth with receipts. Florence founded the HOA Accountability Network, connecting 47 communities in Colorado fighting similar battles, and they've already reformed boards in a dozen towns. Property values rose across Pine Ridge, not because lawns got greener but because governance got cleaner. Families looking for a real neighborhood moved in, people who like tomatoes and transparency. A state law passed the following spring, the HOA Transparency Act, requiring financial audits, competitive bidding, and criminal penalties for board members who violate fiduciary duty. 6 other states proposed similar bills after hearing about us. Elena created the Future Advocacy Journalists Grant to help students document housing rights abuses across the West. She types late into the night sometimes, and I hear the rhythm of it, the sound that builds cases and changes places. If you're looking for a moral, here's the simplest one I can offer after this suburban water war: property rights matter. Water rights matter. The doctrine of prior appropriation isn't just old legal language, it's how communities protect themselves from the worst in us. HOAs are supposed to maintain property values, not weaponize bylaws to punish dissent. Municipal contracts are supposed to serve public purpose, not private enrichment. A homeowners association is supposed to be neighbors solving problems, not a fiefdom. The best revenge isn't destroying what someone loves. It's building something better than what they tried to destroy. I walk the garden in the evenings and listen to water moving through drip lines. Clear water flows cold from an old stone basin you can cup your hands under and drink. The scent of compost and basil replaces the stink of diesel that once hung here. Kids laugh where chainsaws screamed. Every winter we make seed maps at a folding table while the snow presses the yard flat outside and we dream in green. Every spring the beds fill. Every summer the vines climb. Every fall we sit at picnic tables with neighbors and eat what we grew. If you're dealing with HOA corruption, property rights violations, or municipal abuse, tell your story. Share the documentation. Mail copies, not just emails. Call the lawyer who knows easements and water law. Record threats where it's legal. Find your Florence. Call your Dave. Teach your Elena the power of a camera and persistence. And for the love of your garden, learn your water rights, read your deed, look for easement language, understand prior appropriation, especially in places like Colorado. They count on you being quiet. Don't give them that satisfaction. If this story made you cheer or grit your teeth, leave a comment with your HOA tale. If you care about accountability journalism, community activism, water rights, and sustainable agriculture, subscribe and stick around. Elena and I are investigating 4 more cases across Colorado. One involves a $2 million embezzlement scheme and a mayor who resigned rather than see his emails in the light. We have more stories to tell about property rights, water law, civil rights, federal investigations, and how ordinary people win when they refuse to look away. The day they cut my fence, I thought I'd lost 3 years of work. I didn't know that a cut fence would become a line I wasn't willing to let anyone cross ever again. And I didn't know how many neighbors would cross it with me, toward something that feels like a community worthy of the word.